And lastly, most sharks, although not all of them, are apex predators. Some of them are apex, some of them are predators or mesopredators. But as you see in this figure here, they are naturally just small population sizes. They're just already reduced to begin with. Despite that, they do serve a really big role just because of how interconnected they are with the rest of the food web or the trophic cascades as well. So these are just some interesting, fun facts about sharks. Next slide. We also do want to highlight that they've been around for more than 400 million years. So sharks have been on Earth longer than trees have been on land, longer than dinosaurs. So that really puts into perspective just how long their history is and how they've really evolved to be a almost perfect animal. There's also over 500 shark species. So usually you think of great white, the shark from Jaws, but really out of the 500 species, only 3 or 4 are really known to be aggressive or really potentially dangerous to humans. The rest, the grand majority of sharks are not like that. We even have sharks as small as 7 inches. So again, not all sharks are big and not all sharks have the potential to be dangerous to humans. And actually, over 100 million sharks are killed every year, which comes out to be around 11,000 sharks are killed every hour of the day, compared to just 10 attacks that sharks may have on humans, and that might end up being mortally dangerous. And we just have a graph here when we talk about the deadliest or scariest animals, and we'll get into this further. Really, it's mosquitoes, and in second place is us humans ourselves. Next slide. So now we'll really get into the interesting stuff for today. We have our featured speakers. First, we have Kristen is a legislative representative at Earthjustice covering ocean topics, and today she's going to be talking about sharks in policy and in our perception. Sofia Barbosa is the Ocean Program Manager at Hispanic Access Foundation, and today she will be speaking on fishing and seafood, their new seafood guide. And last but not least, we have Raimundo Espinosa, the founder and executive director of Conservación Conciencia, who will be sharing their latest news from Puerto Rico. So first up in our agenda, next slide, we are going to have Kristen. Next slide.
Hey everyone, I'm Kristen. As Camila said, I work with Earthjustice, and yeah, hoping to just chat a little bit about sharks and how the way that we think about them influences the way that we manage them in government, and also how we end up coexisting with them. So first, just for some background, just for global information, understanding sort of where sharks are in terms of conservation. Shark populations have declined 71% over the past 50 years, and that's primarily due to overfishing. Fishing pressure has doubled, catches have tripled, and as a result, there's an 18-fold increase in relative fishing pressure. So thinking about how many fish are actually being pulled out compared to the number of fish that are left. And oops, hopefully you couldn't hear that. About 75% of sharks and rays now qualify as threatened with extinction under the IUCN. And so I think this is really important context to be thinking about what we're doing in the US, because sharks, obviously, they live in the ocean. They're migrating between countries and they're migrating between oceans. And so what we do really matters on a global scale. So next slide, please. And so in the US, the way we manage sharks is primarily under the National Marine Fisheries Service, which is, I may call NMFS sometimes, or other people call them the service. And there are two main laws really that govern their management. The first is the Magnuson-Stevens Act, which has a goal of preventing overfishing, rebuilding overfished stocks, so like the actual group of fish, or sharks in this case, and to minimize bycatch, so animals that are caught by accident and not intentionally. And then the Endangered Species Act, which makes it illegal to harm, harass, or kill sharks that are listed under the Endangered Species Act, requires creating critical habitat, which is the important parts of where they live that are necessary for feeding and for reproducing, and also requires recovery of these species. So the goal is really to get animals off the list and get them back into healthy populations. Next slide, please. And so I think it's really important to, and can you do the next bullets, please, too? Sorry. To also to be thinking about this mostly because we are as I said, globally, shark populations are struggling. That said, we are doing a decent job of managing them here in the US. I think obviously that depends who you're talking to, and it differs in different parts of the United States and territories. But observationally, some people do feel like they're seeing more sharks than they're used to have seeing in the past. And I think, and so this has impacts to beaches, fisheries, recreation. And what we're seeing is, and especially in the media, is like a lot of fear, fear about going to beaches, frustration about, sharks biting fish on fishing line, and assumptions sort of about what is going on in the water that is not necessarily scientifically backed, and also a lot of times is not keeping in context this global situation that we're in. And so it's really important though, because coming at this issue from this angle is actually directly how we end up managing these species. So I've put a picture in here just of a notice from the Federal Register where just a couple years ago, the National Marine Fisheries Service, under the Magnuson-Stevens Act, had a plan to address sort of some of the shark issues that fishermen were feeling that they were having. And this would very directly increase the number of sharks that you're allowed to catch. And those catch limits are, as Camila talked about, really important because if you catch too many sharks, they can't reproduce and they can't survive because they don't reproduce quickly and they take a long time to mature and don't have many babies. Next slide, please. And so I think instead what we really should be thinking about is these baselines of like, again, what the historical population was compared to the current one. So like, even if in one area you might feel like, oh, we are seeing more sharks in this area, it might be like that the level we were used to was here and now it's here, but the historical level was much higher historically. And so it's really important to keep that context in mind. I think there's also a lot of human behaviors that we neglect to consider in this conversation, things that we do directly, like chumming or fishing in the same areas, some indirect things that we think that we do, like habitat degradation or overfishing prey species. And so if we really do want to have fewer negative shark-human interactions, we have to be thinking about this more holistically and reframing that mindset so that we can actually address the roots of the problem and not just end up putting band-aids on problems. So next slide, please. And maybe for time's sake, I won't talk much about this one, but this is just one angle of it, just habitat loss and all the different ways that will influence sharks and their ability to survive. And so thinking about this being one of those human bits that, is increasing the way that we interact with them. Next slide, please. And so now from another angle, I just shared something going on at the federal agency level, but in Congress, this is also sort of the way that we approach problems is from sharks being the problem. So there's a bill in Congress called HR 207, the Shark Act, which really tries to deal with shark depredation, which is when sharks bite fish on fishing lines. And the angle it comes at it is sharks are the problem. How do we get them to stop doing this? But it's not thinking about what is going on in the sharks ecosystem, what's going on in the way that we're interacting with them. And by approaching it that way, I think we're not actually going to end up getting the real solutions that we want. And so I just wanted to highlight some of the things that are going on in Hawaii. For example, I work with some Native Hawaiian partners who've worked a lot on different shark conservation efforts, and some of the things that they've seen that have reduced the way that the number of sharks biting fish online is by doing things like banning chumming or using cultural knowledge about how to change fishing practices, making sure you're not going to the same areas because these animals are smart. And if you put bait in the water, they are going to come back because it's like a dog with a treat. It's, they want to go back. So next slide, please. And so this really just matters because when we're thinking about solutions, if we aren't focusing on, if we're thinking about sharks as just being the problem, like I said, we're not going to actually address the real problem, but it also ultimately ends up harming the good conservation work that we've been doing, and it feeds into this negative perception of sharks that we already have. Basically, every time that we have media talking about there being too many sharks or that sharks are, causing different problems, it leads to shark tournaments and shark culls, which we've seen across the country. And those practices end up, removing healthy females that are important for the species to survive, and it ends up removing endangered species, which is also important. And so and then also, of course, they're important for ecological reasons, and then the cultural significance too. Again, going back to my native Hawaiian partners who I work with, their ancestors are sharks. And so for them, it's really important to be protecting these species because they have intrinsic value in themselves. And so next slide, please. And so, yeah, I just mostly wanted to talk about why, that we need to be thinking about things not just as, again, the sharks being the problem, but thinking about it more holistically. Are there things that we can be learning from indigenous knowledge or elder and community knowledge? Because it really wasn't that long ago that sharks had much healthier populations, and we can be learning from how we can interact and coexist together. Also thinking about it from an ecosystem health perspective, how can we be making sure that, we're doing all the right things on that front so that sharks aren't necessarily drawn to have to be in places where that might cause increased negative interactions. And then also, again, just think about, what human behaviors we're doing that might be accidentally increasing our interactions with them. And so I think if we just change that little bit, this tiny little framing early in the problem solving step, I think we do a lot better of getting to the outcomes that we want that end up supporting our good shark conservation efforts, but then also benefit people in the long run too. So yeah, that's all I got. I can yap about this a lot more, but I'll thanks for listening and appreciate it.
Thank you, Kristen. And if you have any questions for her, please make sure you put them in the chat. Up next, we have Sophia from Hispanic Access.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you. And Kristen, it's kind of a perfect segue because I'm going to be talking a little bit more about what can we do from the sustainable seafood side. So if you go to the next slide, I'm excited to share that we just launched this toolkit last month during World Ocean Month and World Ocean Week. Nuestro Mar, Nuestro Futuro, Our Ocean, Our Future, a sustainable seafood guide. And it was co-authored by 2 of our Hispanic Access Conservation Network members, which is a group of Latino professionals in all areas of environmental and conservation work. And we really designed this resource to be for individuals and communities to better understand the critical issues facing our ocean fisheries today. So we talk about overfishing to habitat destruction to the impacts of climate change and pollution, and the ways in which marine ecosystems are under really unprecedented pressure, and how these issues not only threaten biodiversity, but also livelihoods and food security for many across our country, including Latinos. So through this, we want people to be able to read it and walk away knowing about individual and collective action and how you can contribute to the health of our ocean. So I can share the links in the chat in a little bit. And it's available in both English and Spanish, and is meant to kind of break down some of these key issues and provide some practical guidance on how to engage in sustainable seafood practices. So we touch on some of the main issues like warming temperatures of the ocean, pollution, and more. And if we go to the next slide, I kind of wanted to share why do sharks matter, right? going off of what Kristen was saying, some people have a certain stereotype of them as dangerous animals, but they're really critical to marine life and ecosystem and kind of the food chain. So one issue I kind of wanted to hone in on was the issue of coral bleaching. So if you don't know, corals are actually animals, and they're really essential marine animals that have this like symbiotic relationship with algae, which lives inside the coral and contributes nutrients and oxygen. However, the algae cannot tolerate very high water temperatures and will leave the coral during marine heat waves, periods when it gets really hot quickly, or as ocean temperatures are rising. And so these corals are left weakened, they turn white, and are very vulnerable to disease and death. And approximately 25% of all marine life rely on coral reefs at some point in their life cycle. And so this is one area where sharks play a really critical role. They actually help the reefs by eating like the weaker and slower fish in order to regulate the reef and keep it clean and healthy. And unfortunately, as Kristen mentioned, shark populations are declining globally. And this is something else that exacerbates the issue because sharks are forced to abandon their usual coral hunting grounds to seek food elsewhere, but this further leads to an imbalance of a healthy marine ecosystem. For example, when the sharks leave, this can cause overpopulation of other species and generally upset the balance. So you can see here on this graphic some more details, but that's one thing I wanted to highlight about the critical role that sharks play in these ecosystems. So we can go to the next slide. This is one of the graphics that we have in our toolkit. So explaining the term bycatch a little bit more, this is a big issue that sharks are impacted by, but what is bycatch? Bycatch occurs when a species not targeted for fishing is accidentally caught, and this can refer to either the wrong species, the wrong sex, or undersized juveniles of the target species. And this can especially occur with large nets or long lines, as those methods can't really discriminate and can capture many things in the path. So as you can see in the graphic, the blue animals denote intended targets for capture, and gray denotes those that are accidentally caught. So within this large net, right, you can see that we have both. So that is something that is a major threat to sharks. And as mentioned before, approximately 100 million sharks are caught and killed each year globally, with a significant portion of that being unintended bycatch in fisheries that were targeting other species. So with that high mortality rate, combined with their slow reproductive rates, that's really a serious threat to shark populations worldwide. And sharks are particularly vulnerable to bycatch due to their tendency to follow the same routes as fishing vessels a lot of the time, making them more susceptible to being caught in these nets and long lines. And actually, according to some research and Science Direct and Marine Policy, there's even evidence that the level of bycatch is likely even underestimated due to underreporting or lack of monitoring in many fisheries. So again, sharks are apex predators that play a very critical role in maintaining healthy ocean ecosystems. So it's been said, like, you can tell how healthy an ocean is by the health of the shark population, and they help regulate populations of many other species and keeping marine food webs balanced. So when shark populations decline, that can really trigger like a domino effect of negative effects throughout the ecosystem. So next slide. So what can you do at home to support shark conservation? It can seem very abstract and distant, but something that you can do is help support through your responsible seafood choices and consumption. So, sustainable fisheries that are better managed and regulated make it harder for illegal practices like shark finning or unreported shark catching to occur. So this is something we highlight in our toolkit that we put out, and we talk about the importance of sustainable fisheries that promote transparency and traceability. So Ideally, you want to know where your seafood comes from and how it was caught, if possible. And as consumers, if we support that, it'll help reduce the demand for products that are linked to those harmful practices. And that way we can like indirectly help protect sharks and other vulnerable marine life. So going through a few of the certifications that you can keep an eye out for. We have MSC, Marine Stewardship Council, which refers to wild caught sustainable fisheries, Aquaculture Stewardship Council, which it refers to responsible aquaculture or fish farming. And then we have BAP, which is also sustainability and farmed seafood. And then Fair Trade Certified Seafood, which is ethical and sustainable fishing practices. And I guess I'll put a caveat that sometimes, we can't 100% fully trust all the time, but we can know that these seafood with these labels went through a certain process and help us understand a little bit more about the traceability of what we're purchasing. And then another good resource is the Seafood Watch, which was created by the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and they use this kind of traffic light method where you can search for a certain species or seafood, and green tells you that it was sustainably caught or farmed. The yellow is like could be okay, but there's better choices, and then the red helps you understand really what you should avoid, or that it's a species that is overfished or harvested in a harmful way. And lastly, it's always good to consider eating food that's kind of lower on the seafood chain, like smaller fish like sardines or anchovies or mussels tend to be more sustainable and less likely to have involved any shark bycatch. So those are a few tips, and I can drop the link to the toolkit. And then we have one last slide I wanted to share. As we know, seafood is really a critical part of many Latin American countries and cultures, and seafood feeds over 3 billion people around the world and also employs many millions of people, providing food security and livelihoods. So if you are going to consume seafood, please try to do it in a way that's more likely to be sustainable. And we have some recipes in our toolkit. So if you want to make a nice ceviche or other recipes that we have, you can find that in our toolkit as well. And that's the end of my slides. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Up next, we have Raimundo talking about his research on sharks in Puerto Rico.
Thank you, Camila. You can go ahead and start the video. My presentation is going to be a little bit, it touches on everybody else's, and I really appreciate the order, and the organizers did a great job, and really thank you, Kristen and Sophia, for your presentations, because they really feed into what we're going to talk about a bit. And so some of the work that we've done in Puerto Rico. So we started the shark research and conservation program at Conservación Conciencia in 2016 when the organization started. The work that started back then was because there hasn't been any shark research specifically on sharks in Puerto Rico since the 1960s. And so that was something that when we created the organization, that was actually part of the reason why we created the organization, was to address a lot of these gaps that we had. And one of the main reasons we began with that as well was because the commercial fishing sector was asking us to address what sharks were they able to fish and what sharks they needed to 100% avoid. And there's a lot of policy gaps as well when we're talking about the federal government and the U.S. territories. And so sometimes what's allowed or not allowed in U.S. federal waters is allowed in territorial waters from the U.S. territories. And so this created a lot of issues. Again, with starting off with with lacking science, we didn't have any local science on what sharks were, even what species were present. So we were fortunate enough to start off. We were able to win a grant to start with studying sharks and the shark fisheries in Puerto Rico, to get baseline studies on what species were there and what characterized the fisheries in Puerto Rico. And through this work in partnership with Mo Marine Labs and NOAA Fisheries, we were able to tag the first shark, satellite tag the first sharks in Puerto Rico to see their movements. That created a lot of interesting information. And of course, one of the things that characterizes the work that we do is that all the work that we do with the shark research in Puerto Rico is done side by side with the commercial fishing sector. So the commercial fishing sector is with us throughout every step of the way, from tagging the sharks to releasing the sharks to educating about the sharks to improving shark legislation and calling for improved shark management. I'm gonna, I know the videos. I don't know if it's starting or not, but I'm just gonna keep on giving you the information, and we'll get it going eventually. And so, um, and then anyway, the next slides I think are also there. Next slide. So, part of that work that we were doing, uh, starting back in 2016, a lot of shark fishers in Puerto Rico, shark fishers were the ones that had the most information and knowledge about sharks, their habitats, their species. So to really begin this type of work in Puerto Rico, we had to. It happens. It's okay. Uh, we had to really partner with them to see where we begin to address the areas that are of importance and to see what species were there. And so, uh, I think the first video you're gonna come to see is of the first shark that was tagged with a satellite tag. And as you'll be able to see, this is a commercial fishing boat that we were doing it from. All of 100% of Puerto Rico's commercial fishing is small scale artisanal fishing. And so it's something that it's also makes it very easy for us to partner with because we don't have to really work with the monster in the room, which is industrial indiscriminate fishing. We can really target fisher families, every fisher boat, every fisher individual to really see how we can learn from each other and collaborate. And so the program continued to grow. And part of this work that we did, part of the research that we did on sharks was to really see what species were being targeted and what were being landed in Puerto Rico. We saw that the majority of individual sharks that were being caught in Puerto Rico were hammerhead sharks. And so, even though this was not the majority of the weight, so what does this tell us is that the majority of individual species were hammerhead sharks, even though the majority of the weight was tiger sharks. You can go to the next slide, I think. Um, and so the majority of these sharks were hammerheads, which means, and the weight wasn't, which means they were very small sharks. All these small, juvenile, young of the year hammerheads were being caught in Puerto Rico, which is again something that's it tells us two things. It tells us that the policy was failing. These sharks were not supposed to be landed in U.S. waters, but we saw that there was that jurisdictional issues that enabled legal landings of prohibited shark species in Puerto Rican waters. So to me, again, this to most people is going to look like a scientific publication that is something that presents information. A lot of people that are expert shark scientists on there, but to me, one of the things that really highlights a lot of the work on this are the second two last names, which is Martin Soto and Rodolfo Abrams. Both of them are commercial fishers that took part in the research, took part in a lot of the drafting, which is again one of the things that we talk about. That a lot of the work that we do, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort. For those that have done this academic research papers, publishing them is not an easy thing for academics. So for us that we're not in university, we're not academics, it's even harder. And then collaborating and trying to integrate folks, it just makes that even more difficult. And again, having that participation on that paper with their information and recognizing their knowledge, again, touching base on Sophia and Kristen's presentation, really recognizing that local community knowledge, not just for the science, but also for the credit of where this information is coming from, to make sure that it's published, that folks are aware that collaboration is real. And for on the other side, and let Nobs Fishers know that we appreciate and really want to give them the recognition of stepping up to participating in the science and the conservation. Again, a lot of great information, new information was coming out. What else did come from this paper is that why are so many small hammerheads? Why are there so many small hammerheads being landed? Um, one of the fishers that is going to be on the next publication approached us and said, "Well, I've been fishing sharks for the past 30 years in this one location." I think we can go into the next slide. In this one location, for the past 30 years, and I've been landing hammerhead sharks once a week for 30 years. They're there, and we asked them to take us there. And we went there, and with the idea of we're going to continue the program of working with commercial fishers to catch, tag, release, and study these sharks. I think you have to go to the next one to play it, to just tap it one more time. And so, oh, maybe not. All right, no worries. What we found out where this fisher has been fishing small, what we found out to be young of the year and juvenile hammerhead and great hammerhead sharks for the past 30 years, every week of his life, was that, it took us about 8 years of continue studying that this is actually a hammerhead nursery. And so it was one of these things that it was just shocking, because the area is right next to the San Juan metropolitan area. And so it's an area that's highly urbanized, it's densely populated, and it's been fished for the past 30 years, and yet these hammerheads continue to be there. So one of the things that, again, part of the collaboration with fishers is the transparency, is that, well, we appreciate sharing the information, but now that we have this information, we have to share back and be transparent that these are one of the species that worldwide, as you saw again from earlier presentations, their populations had decreased significantly because of fishing pressures. And so because we did have that transparency, part of the work that we wanted to do was fishers saying, well, we need to protect this area. We need to protect this area because it's highly developed on the land side. Land is affecting our coastal environments throughout the world. Puerto Rico is no different. The urban development, the coastal erosion, these are things that are impacting the sharks. So just remembering the theme of today's presentation, the surf and turf. So we wanted to see how we can protect these sharks. And first, right away, is how can we stop the fishing, commercial fishing of these sharks, which are illegal to do. So since we were working with fishers were happy to collaborate and say, how can we partner on protecting these sharks? First off, you can see in the picture on the right side, the folks on there. I'm the one with the hat. You can see me right away. Starting on, well, your left, is Jaime Acosta, no, Jaime Munoz. That's the fisher that's been fishing there for 30 years. We worked with him with a couple foundations to see how we can stop him from fishing in this area and help him continue fishing outside that area where you see no hammerheads. We've studied this area for about 8 years. These are the areas where we catch hammerheads. The other areas are areas that we don't see them anymore. And so working with Jaime without having to do any legislation yet, we were able to work with him so he can continue fishing, continue earning a livelihood outside the areas where he was catching hammerheads. So we were able to work with him. Fortunately, it was just one fisher in that area that was doing this. And so we were able to work with him, and he was able to work with us so that he no longer fishes sharks in this area. Next to him is Rodolfo Abrams from the publication. He's also a fishing association member of the same commercial fishing association. He's the one that works with us to go out there once a week, every month, to tag sharks and to continue some of the work. You can see Paola Sotomayor, our shark conservation and conservation liaison, and the newest member to the team from Mo Marine Laboratories, Damien Chapman, which is another one of these shark experts that folks know. Part of this work led us to working in collaboration with the Cataño Fishing Association, which both Jaime and Rodolfo are part of, for us to develop a proposal to create the Puerto Rico's first wildlife refuge for sharks, the Hammerhead Wildlife Refuge in Ensenada Boca Vieja, which is the name of this little bay right there. And the proposal is to ban all shark fishing in this area, And part of this is where we talk about some of these gaps in policy. Even though in federal waters in the Caribbean, hammerheads are already prohibited. And for the recreational fishing sector in Puerto Rico, these hammerheads are also prohibited. For the commercial fishing sector in Puerto Rican waters, they are not. And so, of course, Jaime is currently the only one that was fishing these hammerheads. He's working with us to create this refuge to close it off, because we don't, in the future, we don't want to something that's legally still allowed. We don't want to something to continue spiraling, because that's something that folks can do, and we want to make sure that we're able to do it collaboratively with the commercial fishers and have a co-management agreement for this wildlife refuge in Puerto Rico. And of course, a lot of the benefits this could bring. We want to continue working with a lot of the fishers in the area, the wreck fishers, the charters, to promote shark science tours, scientific charters involving the local community and a lot of the work that we're doing. This again, this would be one of the first hammerhead, scalloped hammerhead nurseries in the Caribbean. And so a lot of science is going to be needed from this area. We don't know where the adults are going, where they're coming from. And so there's a lot of science. And of course, we want to continue collaborating. And this means, of course, more jobs, income for the folks on the ground. Conservación y Conciencia, we don't have a boat because we always partner with local fishers because they have boats. And so this is part of the way that we're going to continue collaborating. The Shark Conservation Fund has just funded us to continue working towards this effort, and the local Department of Natural Resources, their wildlife staff, the Bureau of Wildlife at the Department of Natural Resources in Puerto Rico are very supportive. So we're currently working on getting this proposal for this refuge created. And so this is a very exciting, because it's a lot of things that Sophia and Kristen were talking about in the presentations. This is something in Puerto Rico that's applying everything that they were talking about to improving legislation, involving community, involving fishers to continue improving seafood availability for local populations that are responsible. And of course, Camila, you're the shark expert. You know that a lot of the science that we can continue developing here for folks in Puerto Rico, for students at local universities to continue researching this, to create more doctors like yourself that have the scientific knowledge to continue supporting a lot of the work that we're doing here, and so that they continue as well throughout the world and in Puerto Rico. So again, this is something that's very exciting. This is one of the few times we've actually fully presented this proposal to folks, because it's something that we've just finished collaborating and making sure that we're able to share. So again, we appreciate the time to Green Latinos and the space to be able to share this with the folks on the call today. And of course, Kristen and Sophia, thank you so much, because you gave such a great segue for what this type of work can look like. And so really appreciate everybody. And I'm good, I'm done. So we can go to questions. Those are fishers partners with us from our other projects. Papo Lagarto holding the queen triggerfish, and Toñito with the lobster, both from Naguabo, Puerto Rico, in the southeast.
Thank you so much, Raimundo. That was so inspirational and informative. So now we're going to turn it over to our people attending. So if you have any questions for everyone on the panel, or if there's a specific question to someone on what they presented, please feel free to unmute yourself or type it in the chat, whatever you prefer. Open for questions now. I'll ask the first question while we get a couple more going. I would love to know what everybody's, oh, here we have one from Brian. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, Brian Loma, here in Denver, Colorado. When I lived in Samoa and Fiji, there was a lot of effort, not just, like as far as overfishing local populations, to provide long haul management of fisheries and subsistence for the local villages. Is this work in protecting the sharks tied in any way to the fishing or over harvesting is tying all of it together for those estuaries?
In Puerto Rico, you mean specifically?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of them were like you mentioned, like a lot the fishers, the folks that brought the information to us 8 years ago were fishers, and so before then we don't have any data on this. Like, there's no data. Nobody knew that this was out there. The majority of folks don't know that this was out there in Puerto Rico. It was, and again, since it was an area that wasn't very heavily fished by fishers. Not that many fishers knew about it either. So it was that one Jaime that really knew about it. Um, but but yeah, I mean, a lot of what you mentioned about working with other fishers and other fisheries, that we do work with them. So Jaime fishes a lot for mackerel, and so and then the other guy Rodolfo, he's a deep water snapper fisher. So it's a lot of different fisheries we're working, collaborating with to see again different species of sharks and how we can do that research with them, and integrating. We use a lot of the shark tagging as education as the tool to reach out to shark fishers, so that when they incidentally catch a shark, they don't see it as a species to take. They see an opportunity to collaborate in shark science and tagging it so they can release it. And so that's how we're able to work throughout several different fisheries of folks in Puerto Rico. But I think I missed part of your question, so I don't know if you can repeat it, because I think I might have missed it.
No, that's really good. I guess what I was concerned about is like tying this discussion about the sharks to other real-time issues, like overfishing, or ensuring that projects like releasing females. We see that in lobsters where they'll clip the tail of a lobster to make sure that the breeding fish or the breeding lobsters are not harvested. And looking at size or other, regulations to help just overall protect the health of the entire estuary.
Yeah, definitely. And so yeah, so thank you. So now I understand more clearly your question. So yeah, so this has been really a gateway to really help bring that fishing community into collaborating into additional and other conservation projects. And so that's one thing. On the fisheries themselves, and Puerto Rico is very highly regulated. It's every folk needs to have a commercial fishing license. There's a lot of closed seasons for different species. It's pretty highly regulated. Even on that, even though it's very highly regulated, we can still do a lot better. And so it has opened the door to continue working on improved fishing regulations. And again, like I said, the, from the very beginning, when we started 8-9 years ago, the shark fishers were the ones that were saying, there's a lot of gaps or uncertainty between federal and local regulations. Can you help us figure them out and clear them up? And so that really also opened the door to seeing this is a commercial fishing sector that wants to be responsible of what they shouldn't catch and what they should catch, even though the regulations might say something. What shouldn't we catch? And so right now with the scalloped hammerhead shark, it's something that we're doing legally. They could still go ahead and land it, and so they're not doing it voluntarily because they understand that it's a highly endangered species, and so it's part of it. And so this is going on to other species as well. And so it's again, it opens the conversation, and the collaboration really facilitates that dialogue.
Thank you, Raimundo. And yeah, it's good to know that a lot of these fisheries are multi-species, multi-gear. So any work you do on sharks is likely to benefit others. OJ?
Gracias, Camila, and thank you to Raimundo and Kristen and Sophia for your amazing presentations. As a public land advocate at home here in the high desert, this all felt very relevant to me with how you presented it. So thank you so much. I have a question for any one of you. It's about people and about the economy, which I think was touched on to some degree by all of you. There was this conservation language analysis done by ASO Communications on behalf of the America the Beautiful for All Coalition. And one of the things that they talked about in talking about conservation is to not talk about the economy, like the millions of dollars that are booned from recreational, educational, stewardship related activities, but to talk about the experience of economic well-being. And I definitely heard that from what Raimundo was saying about all of the partnerships with the commercial fishers, and what Sophia said about the economic generation that happens when people eat seafood, and people can have jobs off of that. I'm wondering from your experience though, because I think the stories about economic well-being when our sharks are really cared for and stewarded and people are involved in that process, those stories should come from these people who are the fishers, who are the chefs, who are the guides, and you know, so many more in like the recreation and education economy. In your experience, do people in these day-to-day jobs have any interest in telling their stories? In your experience, do they have any like fears or reservation in telling their stories? And overall, like, what do you think that we as a Green Latinos community of active people searching for our environmental liberation, what can we do to honor people's experience of economic well-being and get some powerful stories out there for the change that we're looking to see for our oceans and our communities?
You go first, Raimundo.
Okay. Yeah, sure. All right. So going backwards because I don't remember everything. But for what we were saying do these folks on the ground, do they feel like do they want sharing? And I think there's so many people on the ground that really want to share their stories and their interest and their experience with it. And there's a lot of reservations because they want to share their stories on their terms because so many times folks, I mean, again, uh, Green Latinos from this community, from this space, I feel like we can really understand how folks can feel and be used as tokens and as chess pieces to show around. And so it's one of those things that folks on the ground want to share their experience, but they don't want to be exploited by other stories. And so, and I feel that that's kind of something that's happened a lot. It's like, oh, look, that's my story, and like somebody's publishing and making a lot of money or getting a lot of views, and that was me, and I just got what I did is give my time. That was it. So it was just the sharing of stories has been something that there's a lot of interest, but it wants to be on the folks on the community's terms as well, on how to share it, when to share it. That's what I've seen. But that was just the last part that I wanted to kind of address. Yeah, you had more questions.
I can share a little bit. I think that was a really good question and a really interesting nuance between sharing like the stats and more so highlighting the economic well-being. So thank you for that. We did that a little bit in our fisheries white paper that we put out last year, which was a little bit more technical and just showing where Latinos are in recreational, commercial, and subsistence fishing in the US, which Camila and I actually were co-authors on that together. And we had some folks share their stories. I will say it wasn't super easy to find Latinos in these spaces, and maybe we're not just, on the ground as much as like Raimundo is, but when we did connect with them, they were really eager to share their stories and experiences. And we had much more content than we could even put into our white paper. But those where we was able to show like why the healthy fisheries matter for them, whether it's one was like an owner of a fishing gear store and like he cared about conservation from the economic well-being of his store that's been in his family for generations, or the recreational aspect. But I wanted to mention that's something that we are actually working on as kind of the next step in our fisheries work, is producing a short film. And so a lot of what we do at Hispanic Access is this type of storytelling. So we are going to be highlighting Latinos across the US in the different fishery spaces. So we have some that are commercial, some recreational, and in one way or another, it's important to their economic well-being and also sometimes emotional well-being and beyond. But I think I have to touch on the other part that you mentioned. I think when it's connected to like larger commercial, that's where I found maybe a little bit of like reluctance to share, or like when it's connected to like these huge companies or industries, right? They want to make sure that if they have certain qualms, that they're protected. So that's where I found like hesitancy to maybe truly share everything.
Thank you both so much. Kristen, you want to hop in?
I was just gonna add plus one to everything that was just said, but also like this is why it's so important that Raimundo's doing what he's doing and Sophia's doing what he's doing. I think shark science is a really toxic workplace it can be to be from the scientific side of things, and a lot of time the funders are really just focused on people who can get the most views and super performative work, and that is not actually beneficial to sharks, and it tends to be a very white male dominated culture. And so I think that also creates a lot of intimidation and also reluctance to participate in these spaces, because it's not the way that a lot of folks actually, especially, like Latino folks or the Native Hawaiian partners who I work with, like for them, it's not how they want to see conservation being done and talked about. And so I just want to say I really loved hearing from my co-panelists today, and I'm hoping that we can work towards exactly the types of stories that you're talking about, Olivia, because they're really powerful and show exactly what we do want to be doing in the conservation movement.
Thank you so much for
Yeah,
that,
also,
everybody, and Kristen for
Sure.
acknowledging that. Sorry, we are 2 minutes over time, so I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. I'm gonna hand it over to OJ to close us out and give us some membership info. And please feel to add anything in the chat you need to add, or your email, so if you have any more questions.
And we can hang on after I give you these quick updates for Brad to jump back in with his final thought and close us out. I just want to ask y'all here today that you are a part of the Public Land and Ocean Colectivo de Green Latinos because you're here, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you've made your membership with Green Latinos official. So please make it official, fill out our membership form to become a full throttle Green Latinos member. You can make a donation, you can make a membership for free. Click the different checklists for our various colectivos: public land and ocean, climate justice and clean air, sustainable communities, and water equity. I think that's all. Pardon me if I'm forgetting any, where we have listservs of active community members that are addressing the disproportionate climate conservation and environmental issues affecting Hispanic and Latino communities across the states and territories. By becoming a member, you'll get access to our Slack, where we have a bunch of amazing channels. In particular, the jobs channel. I know it's kind of rough out there these days. You might know somebody looking for a job, trying to get into the environmental field. Lots of jobs being posted on there every day. Lots of chisme. Good place to share about what's catching your eye. Good place to share about your campaigns, to ask for collaboration, to see who's doing what, and overall spark more connection and camaraderie across our Green Latinos community so that we can win our environmental battles. We also have special events that members are invited to. One upcoming is in Los Angeles. There's an extreme weather people's hearing upcoming in LA. It's a part of a series that our Climate and Justice and Clean Air program is doing. So that's it. Please become a member. Get active on the Slack, get active in our membership hub, and find some amazing people who love what you're doing and want to support and work with you. Final slide is our contact information, so you can get in contact with any of us. Those are our email addresses. We're on all of the different social media channels. And thank you so much for attending. With that, Brai, what was your final thought?
Yeah, well, my final thought is, when we were, when a lot of the conversation began a couple of years ago about there's so much shark predations and the shark populations were up from communities and shark and fishers, it was also at the same time that NOAA's shark policies were turning 20 or 30 years. And so one of the things that we also talked to the public and to the fishers is that's the point. We are going to see more sharks. If we're protecting them, that's the point. We're going to see more sharks. And so, and that's the same thing that applies to the other fisheries. If we protect the big groupers, if we protect the other snappers, we're going to see more of them. And so the same thing that we see with sharks, going back to some of the questions earlier about how do we deal with the other fisheries, is that if we're effective and we need to be even more effective, the success that we're beginning to see with sharks in the US, with some populations going up, we can see with other species and other species like sharks as well. So that's what we want. So that was my final slide on that. Thanks, Olivia.
More fish, more community, and more comida. Thank you so much, everybody. Happy Shark Week.
Happy Shark Week, everyone. Thank you.